Bonjour à tous. Hello everyone. I hope you can hear me. Juste quelques mots d'introduction. D'abord pour vous remercier de venir et d'assister à cette conférence de presse de présentation du programme de travail. C'est une conférence bilingue. On parlera en français. Il y a une traduction du français vers l'anglais qui est disponible. And I'll say it also in English. Thank you everyone for joining us. It's a bilingual press conference on the presentation of the program of work of the Security Council. So if you are following the press conference on WebEx, you will have a translation in connecting to the webcast, the UN webcast. And you will have the translation with a little décalage, but you will have it. And so we can take questions in French and in English. Si c'est bon pour tout le monde, je crois qu'on peut commencer. Et je laisse la parole donc à l'ambassadeur qui préside le Conseil de sécurité ce mois-ci.
Okay. Good to see you all. You have a translation, huh? Okay. Because so I will speak a little bit in French, the introduction, but I hope you have a good translation. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Ravi de vous retrouver ce 1er juillet. Je suis particulièrement heureux de vous revoir en vrai. On a passé quand même des semaines à se voir à l'écran et donc découvrir des êtres humains en chair et en os, c'est bien. Et je pense que ça vous permettra de travailler mieux, de nous travailler mieux, d'avoir plus de contacts, plus fréquents, plus informels. Donc c'est bien. Alors la France préside le Conseil de sécurité pour le mois de juillet. Comme on est membre permanent, c'est pas la première fois. On est assez habitué à cela. C'est une échéance qui revient tous les 15 mois, par hypothèse. Il y a 15 membres. L'année dernière, c'était au mois de juin. Cette année, c'est au mois de juillet. L'année prochaine, ce sera au mois de septembre. Et donc, on s'est organisé pour cela. C'est toujours un moment important parce que c'est une responsabilité. Ça consiste à animer et coordonner les travaux du Conseil, qui reste cet organe absolument essentiel dans la gouvernance mondiale en charge du maintien de la paix et de la sécurité internationale, sans doute l'organe le plus fort, le plus puissant de la gouvernance mondiale. Cela se passe dans un contexte que vous voyez, qui est celui de retour en salle. Et donc, ça avait commencé modestement à la fin de la présidence chinoise, ça a continué de manière nettement plus ambitieuse pendant la présidence estonienne qui s'est achevée hier soir. Et là, au mois de juillet, à condition que les conditions sanitaires le permettent, les réunions seront intégralement et toutes en personne. Il n'y aura plus de VTC du tout. Donc, les participants seront des participants en personne, y compris les ministres invités. Je pense que c'est très important parce que le Conseil de sécurité, c'est aussi un dialogue entre les 15 représentants. Et l'objectif étant d'essayer de trouver un terrain commun pour essayer d'avancer dans la solution des crises. Et c'est pour ça d'ailleurs accessoirement et que on essaiera peut-être d'encourager ces interactions en revenant un petit peu davantage et un peu plus qu'auparavant dans des réunions de format de consultation pour que les 15 ambassadeurs puissent discuter eux-mêmes et pas uniquement faire des speeches l'un après l'autre, ce qui n'a pas toujours un énorme intérêt, surtout si ça consiste à répéter le discours du mois précédent. C'est une présidence européenne. La France est un membre fondateur de l'Union européenne depuis 1957. Ça marque fortement notre politique étrangère. On succède à une autre présidence européenne qui est celle de l'Estonie, qui s'est achevée hier. Et il y aura, après la présidence indienne du mois d'août, une autre présidence européenne avec l'Irlande. Et on se pas mal coordonné entre les trois pays pour coordonner les priorités d'une part et puis d'autre part aussi les méthodes de travail, le dialogue, l'accès au conseil de la société civile, etc. Alors juste sur le programme, sur le fond maintenant, sur la substance et ensuite je répondrai à vos questions. Il y a deux grandes priorités pour le mois de juillet. La première touche aux questions humanitaires, qui pour nous sont des questions de paix et de sécurité internationale. Alors, soyons très clairs, nous ne sommes plus en 1945 et les questions dont on va parler au mois de juillet sont clairement des questions de paix et de sécurité internationale. Le 16 juillet au matin, nous allons organiser une réunion ministérielle sur la protection de l'espace humanitaire en présence du secrétaire général des Nations Unies, du CICR, d'une ONG qui s'appelle Action contre la faim. Et cette réunion sera présidée par Jean-Yves Le Drian, le ministre français. C'est une réunion qui vise à comparer les bonnes pratiques en la matière, relancer un agenda positif sur l'action humanitaire, protéger les espaces humanitaires, les accès humanitaires, protéger les personnels humanitaires et médicaux et voir ce qu'on peut faire pour soigner, accéder mieux aux populations qui sont dans le besoin. Ça sera le premier sujet, etc. Et puis, autre sujet humanitaire sur lequel vous allez sûrement m'interroger, c'est la négociation qui a commencé sur le renouvellement de l'accès transfrontalier à la Syrie, qu'on appelle cross-border. Et ça, c'est un sujet qu'on doit conclure d'ici le 10 juillet. Donc, les 10 premiers jours de la présidence française, donc dans les 10 jours qui viennent. Ça va nous occuper beaucoup en marge, d'ailleurs, du Conseil lui-même. Donc ça, c'est le premier bloc de sujets, les questions de type humanitaire. Le deuxième bloc de sujets a trait à tout ce qui est le Moyen-Orient, le Proche et le Moyen-Orient. Vous savez mieux que quiconque que la situation dans cette région au sens large demeure extrêmement fragile, qu'on parle de la Libye, du Yémen, de la Syrie et d'autres endroits. Pendant le mois de juillet, on va s'intéresser beaucoup à cette région, bien entendu. Ça n'a rien de très original, mais c'est important. Nous aurons une autre réunion ministérielle le 15 juillet, également présidée par M. Le Drian, sur la Libye, qui vise à mettre en œuvre les décisions déjà prises par le Conseil de sécurité, qu'elles touchent à la mise en œuvre et à la surveillance du cessez-le-feu, qu'elles touchent au retrait des forces étrangères, dont les mercenaires, qu'elles touchent à la préparation des élections qui doivent se tenir le 24 décembre, ou qu'elles touchent enfin au processus politique qui est fragile et qui doit être soutenu. Donc ça, c'est quelque chose qu'on prépare très soigneusement. Ça sera aussi le suivi de la réunion qui s'est tenue à Berlin le 24 juin. Il y a un momentum assez fragile en Libye en ce moment. Il y a la possibilité d'obtenir des progrès cette année et on souhaite tous que le Conseil de sécurité puisse contribuer à cette évolution. Il y aura également sur le Moyen-Orient les autres réunions sur la Syrie, le processus politique bien entendu, avec Geir Petersen encore, le volet chimique, la réunion sur le Yémen qui aura lieu le 14, une réunion sur le Liban le 22 et puis le débat mensuel sur le Proche-Orient, ça veut dire en fait Israël et Palestine, le 28 juillet. Pour terminer, on aura évidemment, vous le savez aussi bien que moi, des échéances automatiques qui tombent, si j'ose dire, au mois de juillet, puisqu'il nous faudra discuter de la République démocratique du Congo, de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, du Sahel, la Colombie le 13, le Darfour le 27 et Chypre le 21. On devra renouveler le mandat de l'opération politique, de la mission politique à Hodeïda au Yémen, de la Force des Nations Unies à Chypre, FNUCHIP, ainsi que le régime de sanctions qui concerne la République centrafricaine. Voilà, donc je l'ai dit en commençant, le ministre français des Affaires étrangères va venir en personne au Conseil de sécurité présider 2 réunions le 15 et le 16 juillet. Il a invité ses homologues, donc il y aura d'autres ministres qui viendront, principalement le 15, mais peut-être aussi le 16. Comme je l'ai expliqué à mes collègues ce matin, on souhaite que toutes les réunions se passent en présentiel. Donc ça sera ou bien des ministres qui viennent, ou bien les ambassadeurs eux-mêmes. Et parce que je pense que c'est indispensable de remettre le Conseil de sécurité au travail. Non pas qu'il ait chômé pendant le Covid, mais je pense qu'il peut fonctionner plus efficacement ainsi. Voilà, je vous remercie. Je suis à votre disposition pour les questions et j'espère pouvoir y répondre avec Alexis. J'en profite pour remercier toute mon équipe, de la mission, Alexis, Milaël, Katia, Marjolaine qui sont là, et toute l'équipe sera à votre disposition tout au long de la présidence. Bon, Carrie, si ça vous ennuie pas, on va peut-être laisser Eddy commencer.
Par un cas, souvent on commence par la
présidence. Non, on commence par Eddy.
C'est la présidence de...
Ouais, mais c'est pas grave, c'est Eddy.
No, this is tradition, Mr. Ambassador, okay. And I must see to the
I'm sure Valeria will be happy. She has a question on Libya. Go. Okay.
So thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador, for this press conference on behalf of ANCA. We wish you the best of luck for this busy month ahead. My question this time is not on Libya, but is on Syria cross-border aid. So are there any chance to find a common ground on the draft that would renew the authorization for 2 checkpoints for 12 months before the deadline of July 10? The Russian ambassador didn't seem like very optimistic, so what's your point of view? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Valeria. Grazie mille. I think the negotiation just started. I think we know exactly what this is about. The situation in Syria remains pretty bad. The population in Syria needs humanitarian relief, both in the northwest, in the northeast. We would all like to see a cross-line mechanism to work. And they do a little bit, but they cannot do the job. And for example, if you take the situation in the northwest of Syria, meaning the region of Idlib, and the region which benefits now cross-border mechanism through Bab al-Awab, something like 50% of humanitarian relief going to this region is provided through cross-border. So there are, there may be different political narratives, different political strategies, etc. But in the end, facts are facts. And if you close the cross-border mechanism, this region, meaning the northwest of Syria, will suffer a reduction of 50% of humanitarian relief. So these are elders, women, children. They need food, drugs, blankets, sometimes education, and they will not get that anymore. So this is a hard choice to make. So we strongly believe the humanitarian access should be preserved. Once a cross line would just, replace cross-border, why not? We may move to cross line exclusively. The situation and the current situation does not allow to do that. Let's be clear. I think cross line doesn't work. If you take this year, 2021, 50% of cross-line requests have been rejected by the Syrian regime. It proves that it doesn't work well. So I think this is a big issue. So we will continue to negotiate in the next days with all council members. As a chair, I will make sure that the discussion and the dialogue can be conducive to a positive outcome. The deadline is July 10. It's pretty likely that the negotiation will last until the last minute or the last days. I still believe that a certain degree of rationale will prevail and that we will be able to explain and to convince that this is not the time to close a cross-border mechanism. So we'll see where it goes. It's really needed. As I said repeatedly, 92% of humanitarian relief to Syria is provided by the European Union, US, Canada, Japan, basically. So this is basically, if you allow me to say so, this is basically Western money. So, and nobody should expect this money to be reallocated through cross-line, which does not work. So I think this is a hard choice to make, and we hope to be able to continue to finance humanitarian relief in Syria. AD. So.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. And thank you for doing this briefing. My question is on Tigray. There's been a call for an open council meeting tomorrow, Friday. Is it going to take place? And if so, what are you hoping to come out of it? Is there some new dimension that the Security Council could actually improve the situation significantly? There appear to be big obstacles to the delivery of humanitarian aid. The International Rescue Committee said today that one of the main bridges going into Tigray has been destroyed. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. Well, in the Security Council, we have been monitoring the situation in Tigray since the end of last year. The first one to bring the issue to the Council was the SG himself, informally, during one of these monthly lunches. We discussed it repeatedly on the AOB. There was a so-called IID recently, last month, and we have been adopting, I think, a press statement 1 or 2 months ago, and we will certainly be ready to continue to help because obviously the situation is very bad. The humanitarian situation is bad. Famine can take place in Tigray. The human rights situation has been a disaster as well. So I think there are all good reasons for the Security Council to try to contribute, to have added value, and to push for a peaceful settlement of the situation in Tigray. So I don't think anybody disagree with that. There may be disagreements on the role of the African Union, of the Security Council, but I think everybody is concerned. In this context, while the humanitarian and human rights situation remains dire, there has been a change with this ceasefire concluded, I think, 2 or 3 days ago in Tigray, or maybe 2 or 3 days ago. You will check, and it's a significant change. So it may be the beginning of a different phase. So as you said, Eddie, a few countries, Ireland, the UK, and the US, supported by France, Estonia, and others, we requested a discussion in the Security Council. Most likely it will take place tomorrow afternoon here with DPPA and OCHA. We'll get 2 briefings on both the political situation and the humanitarian situation. We'll have a discussion. We'll, of course, listen to Ethiopia, should Ethiopia wants to participate, and I encourage myself and Ethiopia to participate. So the meeting still needs to be confirmed, but it's most likely that it will take place. And I think it's timely. It can be useful. I don't know if there will be any outcome, but we'll see. But we will certainly call on the parties to talk, and we will certainly wish to see the Council asking for better humanitarian access and progress on the human rights front, because it's really so. This is basically where we are. So it's not on the program of work, but it's pretty likely that it will take place tomorrow afternoon.
Carrie.
Ah oui, Carrie, oui, bien sûr, Carrie. En français, Carrie.
J'avais oublié où était le bouton du micro. Bonjour Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, merci pour ce briefing. J'ai 2 questions. La première sur l'humanitaire. Bravo d'avoir choisi ce thème pour le mois de juillet. On remarque qu'il y a de plus en plus de violations du droit international humanitaire. Très intéressante le fait que vous allez échanger les bonnes pratiques. Quelles sont les bonnes pratiques françaises que vous avez remarquées qui marchent encore, qui marchent spécialement en ce moment? Et la deuxième question, c'est sur la MINUSMA, la résolution qui a été renouvelée hier ou avant-hier, je ne sais plus. Vous êtes plume sur cette résolution. La Chine, l'Inde et la Russie ont objecté à l'inclusion du paragraphe sur le changement climatique dans la résolution de renouvellement de mandat. Pourtant, le 20 juillet, ce sera les 10 ans de la première déclaration climat-sécurité du Conseil de sécurité. Comment prévoyez-vous de pousser l'agenda du Conseil dans ce sens? Comment convaincre enfin Chine et Russie notamment d'arrêter de freiner cet agenda?
Alors, sur le premier point, vous avez raison. Ça fait quand même peut-être 30 ans qu'à titre national, la France pousse l'agenda humanitaire au Conseil de sécurité. On l'avait même, les plus anciens d'entre vous se souviennent qu'on l'a fait en Irak, du temps de Saddam Hussein, avec les corridors humanitaires, le droit d'ingérence de Mario Bettati, de Bernard Kouchner, etc. Donc, vous connaissez tous le cadre posé par la charte, l'article 2, etc. Et donc, on agit dans ce contexte-là qui ne permet pas de tout faire, mais qui permet quand même d'agir. La situation internationale a changé. Je pense que la compréhension que tous les acteurs ont de la souveraineté et de la non-ingérence est un peu différente de celle qu'elle était en 1945. Donc, les situations sont davantage liées. Et un nombre croissant de membres des Nations Unies considèrent qu'une crise humanitaire grave est une menace à la paix et à la sécurité internationale. Alors, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, Carrie, on va essayer d'échanger des bonnes pratiques. Personne n'est parfait, personne n'a la solution magique. Mais en ce qui nous concerne, nous, la France, je ne sais pas si je peux mentionner des choses très spécifiques, mais je peux dire les choses suivantes. Ça veut dire que nous, on a toujours considéré l'action humanitaire comme devant être non politisée. Donc, c'est quelque chose qu'on va essayer de promouvoir, c'est-à-dire l'aide humanitaire n'est pas quelque chose qui doit être échangé, sujet à des conditions. L'aide humanitaire est de droit, et donc, quelles que soient les populations, y compris même quels que soient les régimes, parce qu'en fait, il ne s'agit pas de reconstruction comme en Syrie, par exemple. Il s'agit d'aider les populations dans le besoin. Donc l'aide humanitaire, toujours de droit et sans condition. Des solutions innovantes. On l'a fait dans le passé avec les corridors humanitaires, avec le cross-border en Syrie, avec parfois les largages humanitaires qui sont essentiels. Un accent est très fort mis sur la protection des personnels humanitaires qui peuvent pas être traités comme le tout venant. En fait, s'en prendre au personnel humanitaire, ça doit être considéré comme off-limits, comme on dit en bon français. Et puis, dernière chose, mais parce que vous savez, en France, on dit que l'amour n'existe pas, il n'y a que les preuves d'amour. C'est surtout les Françaises qui disent ça, d'ailleurs. Mais la France a augmenté beaucoup ses contributions financières en termes d'action humanitaire ces dernières années. Donc je pense qu'Alexis et l'équipe pourraient vous donner des chiffres, mais c'est aussi très important de pouvoir consacrer davantage d'argent, tous les pays qui le peuvent, à l'aide humanitaire, parce que les besoins sont croissants. Il suffit de voir le Moyen-Orient, le Yémen, l'Afrique, la Birmanie maintenant. Donc les besoins sont partout. Donc voilà. La deuxième question porte sur le climat. En réalité, sur le climat, on le sait depuis le début, le sujet est arrivé au Conseil de sécurité en 2007 à peu près. Et ça avait même été amené, je me souviens, par la ministre britannique qui s'appelait Margaret Beckett. Et il y a eu une première réunion sur climat et sécurité, etc. Depuis donc 14 ans, on discute de ce sujet. Depuis 14 ans, quelques pays, notamment, je ne les citerai pas, mais vous les connaissez, considèrent que ce sujet n'a pas à être traité au Conseil de sécurité. C'est un sujet qui est du ressort de l'Assemblée générale, de l'ECOSOC, de la Convention climat, etc. Et d'autres, dont nous sommes, considérons que, certes, les négociations climatiques ne se passent pas au Conseil de sécurité. La COP26 se passera à Glasgow dans le cadre de la Convention climat. Mais que certains aspects de cette problématique doivent être traités au Conseil de sécurité parce que le réchauffement ou même ce qu'on appelle les dérèglements climatiques ont des conséquences évidentes sur la paix et la sécurité, assèchement de régions entières, par exemple la région du lac Tchad en Afrique, déplacement de population. Donc ça peut parfaitement et de manière documentée générer des conflits. Et donc, il est tout à fait essentiel que le Conseil de sécurité puisse en traiter, puisse être prescriptif, parce que le Conseil de sécurité ne doit pas uniquement être dans le déclaratoire, il doit être aussi dans le prescriptif. Donc, quand il prend des décisions, adopte des résolutions, il doit être prescriptif, y compris sur ces sujets-là. Et dernier élément, Carrie, je crois que c'est important, ce sont des évolutions de très long terme, le climat. Et donc, très souvent, et c'est ce sur quoi la France a insisté ces derniers mois et ces dernières années, ça rejoint la préoccupation de diplomatie préventive. Quand vous regardez une carte de l'Afrique ou d'autres régions, il est assez facile, avec des scientifiques et des experts, d'identifier des zones ou des régions où vous savez que dans 5 ans, 10 ans, 15 ans, le changement climatique, le réchauffement aura un effet majeur sur la stabilité et pourra générer des conflits. Donc, il n'est non seulement pas absurde, mais il est même de bon sens d'essayer d'en tenir compte, d'anticiper et d'essayer d'éviter que ces crises éclatent. Et on peut le faire en avance. Donc c'est pour ça d'ailleurs que la France, on a demandé que le secrétaire général, tous les ans, tous les 2 ans, sorte un rapport plutôt de niveau assez scientifique qui prédise les situations géopolitiques où le climat peut générer des conflits. Alors ensuite, parfois vous pouvez vous tromper, mais les faits sont les faits, et il est assez évident que dans pas mal de régions du monde, on sait que les dérèglements climatiques vont avoir des effets sur la paix et la sécurité. On le sait en avance. On le sait. Alors bon, ensuite, oui, je reviens à votre question, Carrie. Oui. Ensuite, bon, j'en viens. C'est un peu anecdotique, pardonnez-moi, mais effectivement, ce qui s'est passé, c'est une illustration répétée du fait que certains pays considèrent que le Conseil de sécurité ne doit pas s'en occuper. Et donc, inversement, nous allons continuer à insister pour que ça soit le cas.
Est-ce que ça peut être un peu des négociations un peu plus musclées quand vous êtes en train de négocier la résolution? Est-ce qu'il ne serait pas temps, sur les questions de sécurité, de maintenant de dire bon voilà, ils vont pas quand même mettre un veto, aller jusqu'à un veto pour ce genre de paragraphe quand même?
On va continuer à insister fortement sur ces sujets parce qu'ils sont majeurs. La difficulté, Carrie, c'est que très souvent, quand on renouvelle des mandats, on prend des décisions, il y a des priorités de très court terme, des urgences, des décisions à prendre de manière immédiate. Et les enjeux climatiques sont évidemment des enjeux si ce n'est de moyen, même de long terme. Et donc la tentation peut être de se dire, bon, privilégions le court terme et on reviendra sur le climat le moment venu. Et c'est un réflexe qui est assez fâcheux parce que ça consiste à kick the ball down the road et ensuite de ne pas traiter le sujet. Donc voilà. Mais on va continuer à insister là-dessus. Je vois James.
Oui, on va passer à James, and then after we can also take questions from the WebEx, and I have noted all the questions.
Ambassador, first a quick clarification from you, because you said that it's likely you're going to have a meeting tomorrow afternoon on Tigray. You've sat down with all the other ambassadors today. You've adopted the programme of work. What's the doubt in this? Who is pushing against the meeting? And is it going to be, if it happens, is it going to be an open meeting? So that's a point of clarification. And my actual question is also to do with Ethiopia, but also Sudan and Egypt on the Blue Nile Dam. You've had letters, your predecessor has, I think, in recent days, from all of those countries, Sudan and Egypt demanding a Security Council meeting, Ethiopia saying no. Do you think, as tensions are growing between these countries, it would be good for the Security Council to come back to this issue?
Thank you, James, and good to see you. On the first one, I said it's likely to take place. It needs to be confirmed because we discussed that this morning. It's something new. So we decided not to put it formally in the program of work, but we discussed it this morning. You know, there is each month a breakfast on the first day of the presidency. We discussed it at length. And we just need confirmation, and I am pretty confident that it will take place. So, I think it will be public. I don't think it will be what you call an open debate with all UN membership making a speech, but I think it will be public and basically council members, OCHA, GPPA, and I hope Ethiopia as well, because I think it makes more sense if Ethiopia can present his case as well. I think, and I spoke myself to the Ethiopian colleague. The other issue, James, has to do with this dam, the GERD. And I think you're right. I think there is no expectation, a request by Egypt and Sudan to hold a meeting. There is a little less appetite from Ethiopia. It's pretty likely as well that the meeting will take place. Most likely it will take place next week. It will take place in New York. You may have some ministers, interested ministers, who will participate. And this morning, when we discussed the program of work, we decided not to put it on the agenda because things remains to be, discussed, modalities, etc., timing, etc. But there was broad agreement that the meeting will take place. So I live on the assumption that the meeting will take place next week. Yeah, probably exactly in a week from now. Yeah. So.
Maybe we can also, I noted all the question, but maybe we can take also a question from WebEx. I know that Pamela has one.
Thank you, Alexis, and thank you, Ambassador. I'm sorry I don't have video. It sounds like it's loud. I can see from Edie. I'm sorry. My question is about North Korea. I don't see a meeting on North Korea, and I was interested to know what your reaction to the recent news that there's a crisis there. And just a short follow-up to James. Do you expect that there will be the statements of support for an arms embargo against Tigray, at least from France? Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. I would love to say good to see you, but I don't see you, unfortunately. Yeah, I see the CBS building, which is beautiful. Anyway, on the first one, no, DPRK is on the agenda of the Security Council. We can discuss DPRK anytime. During the month of July, there is no regular meeting on briefing on DPRK. This is the way it is. We review the sanctions regime on a regular basis. When there is a provocation, either a nuke or missile, we discuss that on the spot. So we'll see. At this time, there is nothing. Frankly, we could discuss DPRK every day since, the crisis is just an ongoing crisis in the last 15 years or more. But rest assured that we will certainly remain extremely vigilant with the DPRK, at least as far as France is concerned. It remains a huge threat for international peace and security, a major threat. Nothing has been resolved with their nuclear program. They continue to develop their nuclear program, to accumulate fissile material, and they continue to make progress on their ballistic program as well. And this is what the Security Council is trying to resolve. I don't think the goal of the Security Council is to decide on the domestic situation in DPRK. It's not our business, but the business is to try to address the huge nuclear and ballistic threat posed by the DPRK, not only to the region, but to the world. The other issue, Pamela, was Tigray and yeah. Yeah. Well, we are in the Security Council. I think I would maybe just answer that if there is a unanimity in the Security Council to do something, we'll do that. So we'll see where it goes. I'm not sure we'll go as far as what you suggest, but for the time being, I think restating very, very strong message on humanitarian access and human rights compliance would be the right thing to do in the current situation.
Thank you.
Michelle, you had a question.
Thank you. Thanks, Ambassador. A couple of questions on Iran, given the Security Council spoke about it yesterday. First of all, there was a lot of talk yesterday in the Council about hard decisions needing to be taken. Do you think that the ball is currently in Iran's court, or is there anything else the Americans could offer?
Thank you, Michel. I think it's precisely, the wrong way to approach the issue. everybody knows that both have to move. It's not a chicken and the egg. And I think if there is an agreement on all these issues, meaning the nukes on one side, the sanctions on the other, the sequencing and who is moving first will not much be an issue. I think so. I'm sorry to say, I think yesterday's discussion was not very helpful on this one. I think the question is not who is responsible for what and who should do what first. I think it just, it's in a way it's pretty irrelevant. And I think it's a distraction to what needs to be done. What needs to be done is to finalize a package on nuclear measures that Iran should take and finalize a package of sanctions relief measures that the US should take as well. Once this is done, I think it's pretty clear that it can be implemented in a rather simultaneous manner. And the issue is who is doing what first. I think it just, I would not say it's irrelevant, but it's not really interesting. The result, the only thing matters the result. So I think we should really get back to the big issues at stake, which are those two. And on all this one, Michel, I think the other concern, instead of who is doing what first, would be let's both of them and the others, meaning the E3, China and Russia, make a big effort in the next weeks, because time is not necessarily on our side, and I think the longer it takes, maybe the more difficult it will be. So I think it should be resolved in the weeks to come.
So just a follow-up to that, what's the hold-up then in everyone returning? What's the hold-up in everyone returning to Vienna? And yesterday, Iran and China both spoke about Iran wanting guarantees from the US that they're not going to withdraw again. We know the difficulties with that. Do you think that's an unreasonable request? And kind of related to that, do you think any new deal will be enshrined in some kind of Security Council resolution like last time?
No, I think this is just about getting back to the full implementation by everyone of Resolution 2231. Nobody is discussing anything else. And because the objective of these discussions are this one, getting back to full compliance, I don't see any reason why there would be another draft. I think maybe the Council should just applaud. But beyond that, I don't think there is any need to do more in the Security Council. So your first questions, Michel, of course, Iran has expectations. Of course, the US and maybe the E3, we have expectations on the nukes as well. I would not like to discuss the details that much. I used to be in charge for 5 years. I have a great successor, Philippe Herrera. You should all meet with Philippe. And he's the one in charge of commenting the negotiation. I'm not sure I would have loved my predecessor too. So I think, but basically these are very good questions, and they are just currently being discussed. I really hope that we can resolve it in the weeks to come. Yeah.
Nabil, please.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and good luck this month. Back to Ethiopia, are you willing to take any initiative on the dam issue, especially that this month seems to be very critical? Ethiopia set up, I think, a deadline to fill the dam this month, I think, starting this month. So it's very critical maybe now for the Council to do something. And on Libya, are you planning, or do you hope that the meeting will achieve anything in terms of putting more pressure on spoilers in Libya? Because we see that the mechanism on the ground is not moving fast enough, the ceasefire monitoring mechanism.
Thank you, Nabil. Two very good questions. On the first one, I don't think the Security Council will be able to resolve himself this issue of the dam. Basically, this is about a dam on the Nile, and this is an issue between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. And what we should all aim for is, resumption of talks between these three countries and basically making technical arrangements to make sure that they just share the water and cooperate, etc. I think, frankly, between you and me, I'm not sure the Security Council has the technical expertise to decide how many cubic meters of water should go to Egypt, to go to Sudan, and when and how, etc. So I think it's really beyond the Security Council mandate and capacity. So what we could do is, certainly open the door, invite the three countries at the table, having them expressing their concerns, and some of these concerns are very legitimate, of course, and encourage them to get back to the table and to negotiate and to find a solution. So I don't think the Council can do much more than that. We will certainly encourage the African Union to participate to this effort, to continue to participate, maybe the Secretary General of the UN as well, because a lot has to do with mediation, but I'm not sure the Security Council can do miracles on this one. There are many bilateral issues like that, and I think we should be cautious. This other issue, Libya, Nabil, again, we are at a very critical juncture in Libya. There are some good evolution. Until last summer, it was pretty much civil war in Libya. There was no unified government, etc., no ceasefire. So since the end of last year, since October, you have a ceasefire, which I think has been concluded October 23. You have a political roadmap. You have elections scheduled for December 24th. You have a unified government, etc., etc. So, and above all, I think the behavior of regional actors have improved in a more cooperative manner. So there is a very fragile window of opportunity, and everybody believes it's feasible to achieve some progress on the Libyan file in 2021, and nobody wants to miss this opportunity. This is true everywhere. This is particularly true in Europe because this is just our backyard. Ask our colleague from Italy how the impact of Libya can be in Italy in terms of migrations, etc., and the same in the rest of Europe. So it is high time to resolve it. It has been 10 years. It started basically in early 2011. So it's really high time to fix it. It's very difficult. So whatever the Council can do now to increase the political pressure on the Libyan stakeholders, on the regional stakeholders, to make a better job in terms of securing the ceasefire, in terms of monitoring the ceasefire, in terms of doing what it takes to organize good elections, also to urge foreign elements, whether it's pro-Turkish elements or Wagner or others, to pull out of Libya where they don't have anything to do, and leave Libya to the Libyans, I think would be the right thing to do. And we'll do what it takes to encourage such an evolution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Ahmed Fari from ATN. I'll use a quote from your opening remark. You said it's not 1945 anymore. In 2021, just a few days ago, we had the Estonian presidency, which they brought a very timely issue that the Western world particularly is facing, which is cyber terrorism and cybersecurity. They probably took it more from the cybersecurity. What is the Security Council is prepared to do, since the cyber terrorism is an attack on peace and security in the world? We have seen here in the United States disruption of supply lines, both for fuel and for food supplies. We have seen disruption of electric, part of the electric grid. I don't know how the situation is in Europe, but I know that President Biden have spoken with the EU leaders when he met in Brussels and those he met in the G7. Where is the Security Council positioned in that? Does the Security Council have a role in that?
Yeah, very good question. It's a new issue. It's a growing concern. Frankly, I want to pay tribute to Estonia, who organized this meeting yesterday. The meeting was not supposed to, to be a major breakthrough and to take very concrete and operational steps. It was a meeting designed to raise awareness on the issue, and in this regard, it has been a success. Second, there is no doubt that cyber attacks, cyber threats constitute a threat to international peace and security, and therefore can be discussed and addressed by the Security Council. So once you've said that, it's difficult because, of course, it's pretty complicated to identify. It's difficult to denounce who did what. I think it requires a lot of technology, also some political courage. But and we are just at the beginning. But as far as I am concerned, as far as Europe is concerned, I think we are very much in favor of the Security Council trying to achieve results and to be more engaged on these issues. I don't think the Security Council can be the only tool in trying to act against cyber threats. Yesterday, there were different options discussed. Some countries proposed a treaty. Others proposed a better implementation of existing tools. So I think there are a number of tracks and channels where these things may be discussed. We are at the UN, so it's probably always slow. The added value of the UN is to be universal. It's always its big weakness because, it takes more time. And second, in the Security Council, expect strong differences on these issues, especially when some of the attacks are emanating for Security Council members, whoever they are. So I think it will be difficult, it will be controversial, but it's really high time to deal with that and to be able, at least for the Security Council, to have an added value on the threats, which are, of course, growing threats.
Can we hope that the issue of cyber terrorism and cybersecurity becomes an item on the Council? Is there a possibility for that? At least in the
my answer would be, why not?
Yeah, well. Thank you.
And I think it should.
So we will turn a bit to the WebEx also. I see that Abdelhamid has a question, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Abdelhamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. My question is about the question of Palestine. If you recall, in January 2017, France hosted a big meeting on the issue, attended by 70 countries, and there was a strong statement about the two-state solution. The Security Council talks about two-state solution. European Union talks about two-state solution. Everyone talks about two-state solution. While at the same time, Israel is annexing more land, destroying more homes, annexing East Jerusalem, expelling more Palestinians from their homes, attacking Gaza for 4 wars in 13 years, and it looks like the two-state solution is dead. What else can the Security Council do? What else can France do? It was pioneering efforts to address this issue. It looks like during the Trump years took a step back. Is France willing also to take a step forward in this issue? Thank you.
Thank you. I believe the Security Council should remain seized of the matter. I think this is absolutely critical. The good news is now there is a situation where probably all Council members support the two-state solution, and all Council members support the agreed parameters for the two-state solution. So I think there is a better basis than last year to resume progress. What we have been witnessing in the last year is the absence of any peace process between Palestine and Israel since basically the spring of 2014. And what we should all try to achieve is a resumption of talks on a two-state solution, on parameters. At the end of the day, what this discussion will produce, it's a different story. I think it's for the parties to decide what they want to achieve. But at least they should start a conversation based on international law, Security Council resolution, agreed parameters, and before all the notion of a two-state solution. I really hope that the Council will continue to push in this direction. I'm pretty confident it will. I think the last crisis in Gaza during the month of May has been a test case. It showed that you cannot just bring fixes to a situation like that. The more the settlements policies continue, the less feasible the two-state solution will be. The more frustrated some of the stakeholders are, the more unstable the situation will continue to be. And it showed that instead of addressing the symptoms, instead of trying to resolve incidents or phases of violence like in May, you should get back to the root causes and trying to find a comprehensive solution. So I was very pleased to see the new U.S. administration accepting a role for the Security Council in the last events. It was not obvious in the very beginning, but it has been the case in the end. We had a series of meetings. We adopted a substantial press statement. And the Security Council has certainly a very, very important role to play to continue to monitor the situation and to urge the parties to sit down and talk. France has been always very active. We did that, as you said, in January 2017. In recent years, we launched a special format with Egypt, Jordan, Germany, and France to try to push for resumption of talks. We will certainly adjust this and continue to push in the same direction and to make whatever it takes to relaunch this effort. And we'll have in July, I think the meeting on Palestine will take place on the 28th. So we will have and we will certainly insist to keep this issue at a very good place in the agenda, even if sometimes it seems that we always repeat the same thing, but it's very important to keep it alive.
So last question for Lenka. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you, Alexei. Congratulations to your presidency. My question is on Myanmar. What is next, according to you? Would you like to see a meeting, or is it time to wait? Thank you.
Thank you, Lenka. For the time being, there is no meeting scheduled on Myanmar. It's not on the program of work. But I pretty much expect the issue to get back to the Council at some stage because the situation has not improved. The Security Council discussed the situation a number of times already since the coup. We even adopted a number of statements. The General Assembly adopted a pretty good resolution 2 weeks ago, which is a progress. But in the absence of progress, in the absence of implementation, I'm pretty sure that we will revert to that, and I'm pretty sure that Council colleagues will wish to have an update and to continue to increase the pressure to get progress. We will all do that in close coordination with ASEAN and with ASEAN 5-point plans. Of course, we want to be good partners, but in my view, so it's for the colleagues and the Council to decide. I think it's pretty likely that Myanmar will be discussed again in the weeks to come. We'll see. And as a chair, it's just about facilitating this event. Thank you very much, everybody in the room, everybody on screen, including the hidden Pamela. And je vous laisse conclure.
Merci beaucoup à tous. Désolé, on arrive à la fin du temps qui nous est imparti. Sorry, we are running out of time. Thank you very much for everybody for participating, and see you in person. I hope in the premises of the UN. Thank you. Bye.